Hi, I'm Selina from Annie's Bookstop of Worcester, and I'm here with Grady Hendrix, and he is a horror author, and he has written a new book called The Final Girl Support Group. And Grady, could you? I'd like you to tell us a little bit about yourself,
No,
and
sure.
and actually, how you got into writing horror.
Well, I got into writing horror because that's what people were willing to pay me to write. I was a journalist for a very long time, and around 2008, that's kind of stopped being viable. With freelance writers were wandering the streets of Manhattan, willing to write for nothing more than a byline. So I got into fiction, and I've always leaned a little towards genre and weirder stuff. And the more I wrote, the more I realized that, what people wanted to buy from me, was horror, and what they wanted to call it was horror. So to me, I'm just writing books about the world that I see around me, haunted IKEAs, demonic possessions of high schoolers. But yeah, that's how they market it.
Okay, and so for readers unfamiliar with your work, how would you describe what you write?
Um, a lot of people, I'm a very poor person to describe how I write. I think I write brilliantly, and I would leave it there. But a lot of people say I write sort of comedy horror, that it's sort of part scary, part funny. So I wrote a book called Horror Store about a haunted IKEA. I did a book called The Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires about a vampire who moves in down the street from a book club in South Carolina, and they realize they have to murder him. Just normal everyday stuff. So that's sort of the space in which I live.
Okay. What can readers expect from your newest book?
Well, The Final Girl Support Group's a book I wrote because I started thinking about all my books sort of begin with a question. And I started thinking, I've watched horror movies since I was a kid. And I started thinking, I've spent 40 years of my life watching people get murdered for entertainment. It's kind of like, what does that mean? And so I wanted to sort of engage with that in a book. So I think everyone knows sort of a final girl is the woman who survives the horror movie, right? She gets away from the killer, often kills him, makes it to the end credits, usually gets killed in the sequel. And so I wanted to write about these women that this had happened to, and then what had happened to them as teenagers was made into movies and franchises and all this. But these women had gone through this real experience, and they formed a support group, about 5 or 6 of them, and they've been meeting for 20 years or so, and they're starting to drift apart a little bit. And some of them are wondering, why are we still talking about something that happened to us when we were in high school? And as they begin to split up, they begin to die one by one. And the most paranoid member of the support group believes it's a conspiracy killer or conspiracy to kill them. And the more she tries to convince everyone that's true, the more they think she's the one doing it. And what I realized as I wrote the book is that the horror movies I like, and the horror movies that I feel like the ones are the ones that people come back to again and again, they're the ones where we're watching someone survive. There really are, yes, there's murder and mayhem and machetes and all the M words, but you're also watching someone have the worst night of their life and get through it. This sort of hope that you don't have to be strong, you don't have to be anything, you just have to not give up, and you can survive, you can make it, which is sort of how 2020 felt to me, to be honest.
Mm-hmm. So, what do you think draws readers to these kinds of books?
Oh, I think they're not boring.
That's
It's
for sure.
I think for some people science fiction feels too abstract. It's set years in the future on another planet. Fantasy, it's another world. And then, a lot of literary fiction can feel to some people a little sort of everyday. But horror takes place in the world around us, usually the world we live in every day, but it's also about the werewolves and the monsters and the ghosts and all these things that inhabit that world. And, you know, horror is a great metaphor. I mean, we talk about being haunted by a memory. We talk about the ghost of the past. It's the only genre that really sits with death. And in most books, death is the end. And a lot of times in horror, death is the beginning. And really, dying is the one thing we all have in common. No matter who you are, we have no idea what's going to happen to us next. And so I always feel like that's a good common point for a conversation to begin, which usually means I'm on my own at parties with a drink in the corner.
Okay. So, what kind of research went into the support group?
Funnily enough, a lot of my research, I know these movies and I didn't want to watch a lot of them again or anything to write the book. I mean, they sort of are in my DNA. The way if you're a romance fan, you sort of know those types, those tropes, they're in you. And so most of my research, because the book is one long, almost one uninterrupted chase. The way kind of a slasher movie is sort of a chase from A to B all the way through the film, one long dark night. I really wanted to make sure the timetables work. Like, can you get from here to here? Can you travel this state to that state in this amount of time and all that stuff? The one thing I really did do a lot of research on was wheelchairs. One of my characters uses a wheelchair, and I feel like in fiction, people either treat wheelchair users as it's a really big deal or not enough of a big deal. They either act like you're in a wheelchair and your life is over, or they act like you're in a wheelchair. Oh, well, you're the same as everyone else. And most people I know who use wheelchairs, it's like it's a big deal in their lives and it changes their lives, but it doesn't mean their life is over. They're just, sitting there. So I made sure I talked to a lot of wheelchair users, had them fact check it, just to get that part of it right. It's one of those things. I don't know. I feel like when you're dealing with someone who's not like you, it's really easy to make generalizations. And I feel like the interesting stuff in the story are in the details. And one of the things I didn't realize is just how physical you can get in a wheelchair. I mean, there are people who, do self-defense classes in wheelchairs. There are people who do really intense contact sports in wheelchairs. Those things can take a beating.
Interesting. So what is your favorite research story?
I don't know. I mean, yeah, no, I mean, one of the interesting things is, I mean, I was a journalist for a long time and I like meeting people. And so my books are often an excuse for me to go out and find out something about things I don't know about. So I wrote a book called My Best Friend's Exorcism about two kids in the 80s during the Satanic Panic who become convinced one of them's possessed by Satan. And I really had to research deliverances, which are sort of the Protestant version of an exorcism. And there used to be a lot of videos online. They've mostly come down since, of churches doing deliverances, and often they would do them big group ones. So you'd see like a fellowship hall with like facilitators walking around wearing like, a high visibility vest or something, carrying a garbage can for people to throw up in. There'd be a snack table in the back with the kids running around as these people were like getting their demons out of them. When I wrote Horror Store about a haunted IKEA, it was really, I talked to so many IKEA employees, and I actually spent about a week in an IKEA for about 12 hours a day, which really, I haven't been back in one since. I'm not sure I order that online now. So really I get to do kind of everything. One of my favorite things I did when I was a journalist is I got to go to a machine gun shoot, which is sort of a big machine gun event down in Knob Creek, Kentucky for machine gun collectors. And this was right before Y2K was supposed to wipe out all our computers. So it was a really fascinating hotbed of sort of like conspiracy theories and gun nerds and weird militia groups. And, it was great. So I love getting out there.
So what was the biggest challenge in writing and putting out this support group?
Well, this is a book. It takes me usually a year and maybe a couple of months to write a book, usually about a year. And this book has been about 40 years in the making. When I was a kid, I wasn't allowed to see R-rated movies. And so I convinced my scoutmaster that when we went to the gas station for snacks after meetings, I was allowed to buy magazines with my snack money because, reading is good. And so I would buy Fangoria, the horror movie magazine,
Yes.
and then read about the R-rated movies and pretend I'd seen them. So everyone in carpool didn't think I was a loser. And I remember the first one I picked up, I think it was issue 12 in 1981, had this whole big article about the beginning of Friday the 13th Part 2. And for people who haven't seen it, Friday the 13th Part 2 begins with the final girl from Friday the 13th Part 1, played by an actress named Adrienne King. And she survived the first movie. And here she is at the beginning of the second, hanging out in her depressing house, making some tea, talking to her mom on the phone. And all of a sudden, Jason pops up and stabs her to death with an ice pick. And I remember I was about 8 or 9 years old, and I was horrified. the sort of casual cruelty of that she survived all this stuff in the first movie and saw all her friends die, and then she just gets knocked off in the second movie. And it always stuck with me that I thought she needed a better ending. And so, fast forward years and years and years, and I decided to write this book, and I really jumped through hoops because I started writing it in 2014, and no one wanted it for a while, and it got sort of put in a drawer and taken out, and I finally sold it in 2019, I guess. And the ending never came together until I was doing the final rewrites in 2020. My mom got real sick, and I had to go down to South Carolina in the middle of that second wave of the pandemic to sort of look after her. And so I'm sitting in her little guest bedroom that's all orange for some unknown reason. And I realized what this whole back of the half of this book had to be. And I rewrote the whole thing on this tiny little table. And books are weird. They're like jokes. They're either funny or they're not. There's no like, it's a joke that's 80% funny. Like a book works or it doesn't. And that's what got the book working. And I sort of wrote my way through that really horrendous bit of the pandemic, sort of kept myself sane, finishing this book and taking my main final girl through it. And afterwards, I was like, I should talk to some final girls about this. Women who play the movies. And a friend of mine had Adrienne King's, the actress Friday the 13th Part 2's address. So I sent her the book and she fell in love with it. And so we talked a lot. And I didn't realize that when she had made Friday Part 2, it had been really traumatic for her. She thought that she was the lead in the movie and no one told her differently. And what happened was she had a stalker at the time and had told the movie that she had a personal situation, but she wanted to do the film, and they thought she meant she was pregnant. And so they cast another actress, shot the entire movie, and then told her to come to set. And she showed up thinking it was her first day on day one of the film and didn't know that it was her death scene until the stuntman playing Jason started stabbing her with a fake ice pick. And when it ended, they put her in a car, drove her to a motel, and just left her there. And it had been this tremendously traumatic experience. And she really thought the book was sort of this happy ending that she never got. And Adrienne and I really jumped through a lot of hoops, but we got her to do the audiobook. So she's the narrator book, and she does an amazing job. I've never heard someone so invested. And so for me, it was really closing the circle to go from being this 9-year-old kid in this gas station, reading this magazine, being like, this person should really get a happier ending, to getting to be a part of Adrienne's actual happy ending 40 years later. It meant a lot to me and to her to sort of bring that all the way back around.
Wow, that is an amazing story. Great. So in the Final Girl Support Group book, what character did you love or hate the most while you were writing it, and why?
One of the women in the support group, I mean, I love them all. They're all my little mutant children, but Heather, who is the one who sort of went through a Nightmare on Elm Street situation where someone in her dreams was trying to kill her and no one believes her. And she's understandably grown up to have a lot of issues with self-medicating and drugs and alcohol, which is understandable. And she really doesn't trust anyone, and she's kind of out for herself. She was so much fun to write. I mean, I really like writing characters who just are willing to flip the table at a moment's notice. And then my main character, Lynette, she's a final girl who sort of decided that no one was going to keep her safe but her. And so she's really become a shut-in and an agoraphobe, and sort of really weaponized her life and learned to shoot and learn self-defense and all these escape routes from everywhere and all this stuff. It's the kind of thing kids do, like, what if this happens? What am I going to do? And in the book, it's really fun to write from that point of view. It's the first time I've done a first-person narrator. It's really fun to write from a really sort of out to lunch point of view. And it was also really fun to write her going from sort of this woman who's stuck in this night where everyone she knew died when she was 17, to sort of get her out of that and write her into a real, fuller, richer, bigger life. It did a lot for me.
Great. So what else can we expect from you in the near future?
I've got, well, I'm doing a ton of events for Final Girl Support Group. I do things that are more like shows than author events. So next week, I've got on my website, gradyhendrix.com, it's got my events. I've got one that's virtual in the Eastern time zone, a virtual one in Central, and a virtual one in Western, each one with a different independent bookstore. Um, and I'm doing a show about murder books, sort of the history of murder books, because ever since we invented the printing press, we have been publishing books about people murdering each other. And I will be talking about everything from Jack the Ripper fan fiction in the 19th century to Anne Rules, A Stranger Beside Me, which is the great American true crime novel. Truman Capote can go jump off a bridge. And even Primal Hamster Trauma, Zodiac Killers, and not the ones you're thinking of. Pretty much every wild and weird corner of murder books ever. But I've also got another book coming out in the fall called These Fists Break Bricks, which is a nonfiction book. It's about the history of Kung Fu movies coming to America. It's got a lot of art in it. It's a big, fat art book. But my researcher and co-author, Chris Bajali, and I mean, this is a wild story. A lot of people think Bruce Lee movies brought those martial arts movies to America, and that's just not true. I mean, we unearthed so many stories that have never been told before, from the fact that the CIA used to use karate movies as a front to investigate communists in the Japanese film industry, to an 11-year-old boy who actually made the very first fan film that became a global blockbuster, to a martial arts star from the 70s and 80s who wound up living on the streets in Arizona until his students rediscovered him and saved his life. It is everything from the search for the next great Black martial artist to how Chuck Norris ruined America. So it's all in there.
Wow, that sounds very interesting. Great. Okay, now I have some questions for you about being a writer.
Oh, sure.
What is your favorite part of being a writer on the whole writing and publishing process?
Oh, I got to say, I love, I mean, this is sort of cheesy to say, but this is my job, and I'm very lucky that I like my job. It is really, really hard, but not ditch digging hard, not working at McDonald's hard, but hard in its own way, to sort of figure out a book that you think is going to work and you're going to spend a year with. And then I love researching it. I love diving in. I love the routine of every day coming in and sitting down and writing, and that becomes your life. And you enter this weird state where, like, the book is everything. You're kind of a little bit disconnected from what's around you. You're a little slow on the uptake. Your friends think you got really stupid, but you're just thinking about the book all the time. And then I really love that I'm a little pushy. And so during the production process, I sort of have gotten to learn where I can push things. Like, I want books to look cool. So I want the ebook to have extra stuff in it. I want the audio book to have something special about it. I want to do like interstitials and design work between the chapters. So I've learned where to sort of push during the production process. And then, I find the virtual promotion hard, but I love going out on the road and meeting people. I mean, this is my stinky little office where I write all these things. And like, it's really nice to get out there after being in here for a year and actually meet people and talk to them and hear about them. And, I've got a list of indie bookstores across the country I go to that I love, that I know the folks there. And it's a blast. I mean, I couldn't be doing anything better with my life. Well, I could be doing a lot of things better with my life. I couldn't be having more fun.
Okay, I've got questions for you about your office a little bit later on. But what do you consider the most challenging part of the writing process, and how do you overcome that?
Oh, just getting your butt in the chair every day. I mean, it's, and I do whatever's necessary. Some days I'll write longhand if that's what it takes. Some days I'll do it somewhere else, although I prefer to do it here. I keep a word count in a diary I have to make sure every day I'm on my count. Like, I do whatever it takes to keep my butt in the seat. And some days you're writing a part of the book you don't want to be writing. Some days you're writing a part of the book that's hard, or you've got to go back and rewrite something that's complicated, and it's a pain. And it's just whatever gets your butt in the seat.
And what's been your favorite adventure during your writing career?
Oh, wow. That's hard. I'm trying to think. Oh, one thing that was really, really fun is I did a book called Paperbacks from Hell about the horror paperback boom of the 70s and 80s. And writing that and being able to bring a lot of these lost kind of out of print books back to attention and finding these writers and meeting them and meeting their families and their heirs. And, a lot of these artists who did this great horror paperback cover art, the publishers didn't want them to become famous. So they'd blur their signatures or crop them out. And so to get these guys and women attention again, it was just really, really gratifying to be able to do that. And I wound up working with a publisher called Valancourt, where we've bringing these books back into print, which has been really nice. I mean, one of the writers about a year ago sent me an email where she's like, I just got a royalty check from When Darkness Loves Us. It's like, I haven't seen one of those since 1986. And it was just so nice to be able to do that. And I think for some of these folks, there was a writer, Ken Greenhall, who really is the heir, I think, to Shirley Jackson's kind of like her very quiet, very precise, kind of chilly prose that really traffics in understatement. He really feels like her. And his books are amazing, and they all kind of flopped. They all came out from terrible paperback houses, and they all kind of like didn't really sell that many copies. And he always had a day job editing encyclopedia. And I actually met his widow. I wrote her a letter. I sort of thought I'd never hear from her, and she got in touch, and I was able to sort of give Ken a lot of attention for the book. And now when I started writing the book, none of his books were in print, and now all of his books except one are back in print. And Agnes was fabulous. And I actually got a call from her after the book had been out for about a year. And she's like, look, I'm on a payphone. They've put me in some kind of home in San Diego. I don't know what the hell I'm doing here. I probably can't talk to you again. But I heard you do this show now with the book and you talk about Ken. And I was like, well, yeah, people were, I'm going to be out in San Diego doing it. Do you want to see it? She said, no, I don't. But I just want to say, Ken would have loved it. And she hung up. And I was like, you know what? Good. That was what I needed. So it was really nice to give some of these writers. I think a lot of them thought their careers had ended and they'd had the ending they were going to have. And it was nice to give them a slightly different ending.
Wow. Yep. That's amazing.
I mean, listen, as a writer, we are all destined for the remainder table, it comes and that's where all books are dust.
Okay. So what is the greatest lesson you've learned thus far in your writing career?
I think the lesson I've learned is that it matters. I write horror. I write goofy books about book clubs killing vampires and final girls in support groups and haunted IKEAs and horror paperbacks, but I can't phone it in. I can't cheat. Every day I've got to sit here and be as honest about what I'm writing as possible, because people can tell and they deserve better. And if this is the row I've got to hoe, it's not an important one. I am the guy people read between TV shows. I'm the guy they read when they're killing time at the doctor's office. But I want to be that book that gives you a little something extra. So to me, that's kind of the lesson I learned is I can't cheat. I can't take shortcuts. I can't phone it in. I gotta be here and on and give it everything I got. Because people will know that my heavy metal demons are phony baloney demons if I'm not giving it my all.
That's true. What piece of advice would you want to share with other writers?
Well, I mean, I'd say to other writers, you should quit. I don't want the competition. And so I think give up. It's hard. Be a lawyer, make money, make real salary. That'd be my big suggestion. If you can't be dissuaded, all I would say is stop watching TV and start reading books, because I mean, TV is great and all, movies are great, but I can spot within 5 pages if if his imagination has been thoroughly colonized by movies. There's nothing wrong with being a movie fan. There really isn't, but books and movies work really differently. And I can see authors who are trying to turn books into movies, and that's what they're sort of drawing on. And you can just spot it, and it feels thin.
Hmm, that's interesting. So a lot of writers. Does this happen with a lot of writers?
I wouldn't say a lot, but I see it a fair amount, and it's really one of those things that I find that it's kind of like if the things that are being described feel and sound like the kind of thing that a movie budget can afford, and could be shown on a screen. If the characters feel like someone you've seen before, and also if it's missing that interiorness. Movies are all exterior, which is great. I mean, I write movies. I make a lot of my living from movies. I love doing them. I have become a better writer by writing movies, but books are very interior. Like in a movie, if someone's thinking, you can't show that. You can show someone like look puzzled or scratch their chin or show what they're thinking about, but you can't show someone thinking. It's impossible. But in a book, it's all someone thinking. It's always from someone's point of view. I mean, you can do different things, but like usually 80% of books are from someone, you're in their head. And that's what's so great about books. They break down this sort of I think William James called them accidental barriers between people, these accidental barriers of consciousness, and lit us into another head, and not just another made up person's head, but the head of the person who's writing it. I can pick up a book and know exactly what was going through Edith Wharton's mind. And she's been dead for a very long time.
It also depends on the point of view that the writer is writing from.
Right, right.
Okay. So are there any clubs, groups, or organizations that you'd recommend to other writers that have helped you in your career?
Not really. I mean, there's places out there, but none are mandatory. I'm part of the Horror Writers Association, which does a lot of outreach and a lot of stuff like that, which is great, but it's not necessary. You know what I mean? I'm part of Writers Guild East because I'm a screenwriter, and that is necessary because that provides my health care. Yay! I got my health care for the first time in 4 years. But no, and it's always weird to me that there isn't an authors union. Screenwriters have a union. A lot of people have unions. Authors don't. And the one thing I would always say to writers is talk to other writers. We don't talk enough business with each other, and you wind up in positions where you get taken advantage of. And I don't mean to sound negative. I love my publishers, but they're trying to get the best deal possible, and it puts you at a disadvantage. And so writers should just talk to each other more. And they should talk about their numbers and their money, because it's something we're all shy about talking about. But if we don't talk to each other about it, who is? And then you get people who get ripped off. I mean, I didn't have an agent for the first 5 years of my career. And I signed some terrible deals because I didn't know any better, but I also couldn't get an agent. I was going to agents and they wouldn't rep me. And other writers are the people who are like, you need to watch out for this. You need to make sure you don't do that. And I sort of learned through Hard Knocks and through other writers really helping, picking me up and brushing off my shirt, straightening my collar and setting me on my way.
Interesting. So if you don't have an agent, the best thing to do is to talk to other writers. But like the best thing to do if you can is to get an agent.
Well, not always. I made some dumb deals that I'm still paying for because I didn't have an agent, and I couldn't get an agent. So it's a little moot, but also I didn't have the juice to get an agent that I should have had. And it was around my fourth book that I landed my literary agent, and I already had my contract for my fifth, but he was able to do some stuff for me that really helped, but he wouldn't have repped me out of the gate, and I would have been a different writer. So it was hard, it was rough. I did a lot of dumb things, but I'm glad it worked out that way. I mean, at the end of the day, contracts aren't hard, and if you talk to someone who knows what they're doing, they can help you.
Okay. Now I have some questions about you as a person.
Ah,
What is one thing that most people don't know about you?
oh, that I am a very good juggler and I can eat fire.
You can eat fire?
Yeah, I learned how to do it in college. This guy, Ben Mack, he was a really good magician. He was a wild man. And we had a lot of boring nights. So I already knew how to juggle from these guys I learned from in South Carolina, who were these traveling performers called the Flying Fettuccine Brothers. But Ben Mack taught me how to balance a stepladder on my chin and how to breathe fire and how to eat fire, which I can do to this day. It's not good for you, but I can do it.
No, not at all. Wow. Okay. What question do you wish interviewers would ask you? And what would your answer be?
Oh, wow. That's letting interviewers off the hook. um, oh, I'm trying to think. Let me come back to that because I'll have a good answer, I think, but I'm not sure what it is yet.
Okay. All right. The next one is, what is or are your passions when you're not writing? And how do you make time for your non-writing hobbies and things that you love?
I don't have hobbies, unfortunately. I write. I'm a book a year writer, and that's what I read a ton. I love reading. I mean, I watch movies and things. Years and years ago, about 17 or 18 years ago, I started a Asian film festival in New York. And for years, that was a big part of my life. And I don't do that so much anymore, but I always keep up with like the Hong Kong, into less these days, but Japanese, the Korean, the Indian film industries, what's going on there. And so that's a big thing. My wife's a chef, and so we are always going out to eat to try places so that she can see if they're, what she can steal or if they're doing anything better from her. So yeah, so that's kind of what I do. My life is very quiet. I like the routine.
Okay. What does your writing space look like? Told you I
Oh,
get this.
yeah, it is this is it. It is a very small cubicle in this is a office building that you rent office space in, and most of the people I tried a writer space for a while, but I really hate being around other writers like that. They're annoying. So on that side, I have a driving school. On that side, I think it's these guys with some kind of startup or something. There's a passport agency across the hall and people who do medical billing. So it's just straight up old school offices. And over my desk is the wall of crazy I sort of put up for every book, where I'm sort of like a bunch of images. Right now I'm writing my book for next year. So that's next year's wall of crazy. And behind me is Tom Monteleone's Night School, the cover of his book, or sorry, Night Train, his book about the New York City subway system haunted by monsters, with an amazing Lisa Falkenstern cover. So yeah, that's where I am.
Okay. And do you have any favorite foods or drinks that you like to have with you all the time when you're writing or editing?
Nah, I mean, I drink coffee like it's going out of style, but otherwise, man, hydrate, hydrate, hydrate. It's just water. Especially if you're drinking so much coffee. And I can't eat or listen to music or drink or anything when I'm writing. I'm easily distracted. It's why I can't do audiobooks. I love them. And, I listen to bits, but I suddenly realize I'm doing something and like two chapters have passed and I'm lost.
Okay, so you prefer silence when you're writing
Yeah.
rather
It's
music.
really boring, right? Like, yeah, silence. I'm a boring person.
Okay. Um, and since you're in an office, I'm going to assume that you don't have any furry or feathered or otherwise non-human companions with you.
No. My wife is sort of deathly terrified of animals. So, but I grew up with a lot of pets, and I'm actually very, very good friends with a 3-pound Chihuahua who belongs to one of our chefs at the restaurant that my wife owns. And so she works very long days. So usually about once or twice a week, I'll go down and my Chihuahua friend and I will take a walk and hang out together, have some quality time. Sometimes she'll like sleep over. We're friends. Have a slumber party.
Okay, that's great. Um, I just have two more questions for you.
Yeah. And we got
Okay.
to get back to the one, what I wish people would
Yes.
ask me.
Okay.
Yeah.
We'll save that one for the end.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Where can people find your work aside from Annie's Bookstop of Worcester? And as usual, I am going to plug Annie's Bookstop of Worcester. You can get any of Grady's books at Annie's Bookstop of Worcester. We can order them for you, or any books that we can get, we'll order it for you. And you can call us at 508-796-5613, or you can send email to orders@anniesbooksworcester.com. And where else could people get your books?
I mean, the best place to go is gradyhendrix.com. I've got links to each of my books are there, links to the audiobook, links to the ebook, links to both Amazon and Bookshop, and and anywhere, you can. I think Bookshop did an amazing thing last year. And I just want to say really quickly, one of the things that was really incredible, because I released Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires last year in April.
Yep.
And I went from having a very large book tour to having an all virtual book tour. And I was amazed at how quickly so many indie bookstores turned on a dime. And they went from being brick and mortar stores holding events to doing pickups and curbside and shipping and virtual events. And, listen, I order from Amazon all the time. All that stuff. But the local indie bookstore in Charleston, where I'm from, my mom has lung disease. And so she really had to take quarantine seriously. And she just gave them her credit card. And once a week, they would bring her 5 new books for the next week, drop them off on her porch. And then Polly, who owned the store, would text me to let me know she'd seen my mom and wave through the window and she's doing okay. And, Amazon's not doing that. Indie bookstores are part of the fabric of our communities. And I've seen communities lose them and they don't come back for a very long time. So you always pay a little bit more. You don't get same day shipping, but I think of that as a tax we pay to know our neighbors.
Thank you. And my other question is, how can we follow you, your work, and share your awesomeness?
Oh, I just go to gradyhendrix.com. It's got a link to all my tweeters and my Facebook. And also there's an event page there with a list of every single virtual event I'm doing. I am doing talks with Adrian King from Friday the 13th. I am talking to people like Stephen Graham Jones, who has a slasher book out this summer called My Heart is a Chainsaw. We will fight to the death over whose book is better. I am doing my virtual show. I am doing live shows. So yeah, gradyhendrix.com. It is all there.
Great. Excuse me, my cat just knocked things over.
No, that's all right.
Okay, now the answer to that question. What is...
Yeah. The question I wish people would ask. So there's really 2, I think. And one is, I don't ever hear anyone ask about the book business. And I get it. Like, that's sort of it's someone as a journalist once said, no one wants to know about the snack table. Or no one wants to know about the sandwiches in the green room. Like, no one wants to know when you're writing a story about the movie, if the screening was good or you got snacks or, anything like that. So no one wants to know about the business. But I do feel like publishing is a really old-fashioned business. And I really wish that authors and publishers, there's some things that would be so easy to do: better royalty reporting, better royalty payments, not the amount but the timetable authors get paid. I really think that authors could also do a way better job of reaching out to bookstores. I have my career because of librarians and bookstores I've met, and I see authors who just don't even know how to get in touch with the bookstore or how to relate to them. And it makes me so sad that their publisher isn't sitting there talking to them about this, and here's how you do it. And here are the bookstores we know, and hooking them up, and how much of it falls to the author. And I just think so many things like that could run better, and then the other thing I always wish I'd be asked is, have you ever almost died? Because I feel like everyone's had a moment when they've almost died. And I really like asking people that at parties because, I find it fascinating. the one time I thought, I'm going to die was, I mean, I've had a few close calls, but the weirdest was a friend of mine growing up lived in this subdivision called Creekside. And they were building a new phase on it. And they hadn't really gotten the houses up. They had the streets, they had the lots. It was pretty big. And they sort of stopped building it for a while. I don't know if what happened, but they stopped for a year or so. And so it got real overgrown and kind of creepy back there. But there were these roads cut in these lots. And me and him and his sister were walking one day, and this white van just started like rolling up like behind us, like just sort of keeping pace with us. And a white van's like such a abductor cliche. And we were probably like 9, 10, 11. His sister, I think, was 13. And it started to pick up speed. And so we started to run, and that thing flew after us, and we hit the woods. And it slammed on its brakes, and these two dudes were in it. And the one in the driver's seat we couldn't see, but the sliding door opened, and there was a dude wearing a pair of pants with a piece of rope for a belt, and that was it. And he came out of there, and he was like, "Kids, I'm not going to hurt you. Come on. Don't make me come looking for you." And they started to cruise the streets of that like abandoned subdivision. And we were trying to sneak back home through the woods, and like the roads kind of, and it was about 2 hours or 3 hours and getting dark before they finally gave up and left. But all three of us were convinced that we were going to absolutely be murdered. It was everything we'd been told in the playground that was going to happen to us. A white van full of creepy dudes right there manifested. And so that is my I almost died story.
Wow. Yeah, I would say that that's probably is I almost died story.
I don't know. Maybe they were just going to like buy us snacks. I have no idea. I'm assuming they were going to kill us. White van. You don't own a white van if you've got good intentions.
No, that's true. Oof. I think you're right, though. I think a lot of people do have those kinds of stories, and they just don't talk about it, or they put it in the back of their memories.
Yeah. Well, the other one I always like to ask people is if they've ever seen a ghost, because it's such a normal human experience, and everyone's so clinched up about it, and because they think it makes them sound crazy or like a weirdo or something. And man, I worked for a parapsychology research lab for like 5 years. I answered the phones, and like I've heard everything. And two things I know are, one, having seen a ghost doesn't make you crazy, and the other is it's happened to almost everyone. And I'm so not interested in what it might be. I'm so much more interested in what people's experience was and how they fit it into their life and how it relates to them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there are so many unexplained things that happen, and so many things that people experience that you just don't that people have said will happen, and people don't believe it.
Yeah. Well, exactly. And one of the things I always find interesting when I talk to people about this is so many people have seen a ghost, and it's been a tremendously meaningful experience for them. It's helped them deal with loss or grief or loneliness. And it's been a powerful thing, just this moment in their life. And they feel weird talking about it. And it's like, dude, it is so human and so normal.
Mm-hmm. Yep, there are a lot of things like that, not just ghosts.
Yeah, exactly.
Auras of people and
yeah,
like that. There's a lot of stuff out there.
Yeah. And, sometimes it's just a blip. It's funny. I had one of my friends I did the film festival with died really young of leukemia. And probably like 8 or 9 months later, I was walking down the street, and I was like, oh, there's Dan. He just was walking right by me. And I was like, oh, what's he doing in my part of it? I didn't think he's dead. I didn't think anything. It's like, oh, what's he doing in my neck of the woods? And I turned around to talk to him, and I realized it was another guy with a shaved head who looked a little like, it wasn't him. But it was such a nice moment just to see my friend again. And of course it was someone else. I just mixed them up in the street lights, but it was a really nice moment for me, and like not a big earth shaker or anything, but I feel like that kind of stuff, it's part of what makes us human and alive.
Mm-hmm. That's true. That is true. Well, that was a great answer to that question.
Oh, thanks. I'm glad I passed the test.
Yes, you did. Well, thank you very much. Those are all the questions that I have for you today. And it was really great to have you. And thanks for answering our questions.
No,
And
man, thanks for having me. I really love talking to people and doing these things. So it's good to meet you guys finally. I've known you by email for years, so this is the first time
yes,
we've been speaking.
yeah, that's true. That's true. So anyway, next time, maybe very soon, hopefully we'll be doing some events in person so we can have you come and do it.
In the
Yes.
fall, let's do it.
Let's do it. Yeah, hopefully. Okay. Well, thank you very much. And
Thanks so much.
we'll be talking.
Bye.